Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Apple Exchange on August 14th. iPhones and iPads. What's the difference? I've had several clients to ask me about using an iPad as opposed to, or in addition to, using an iPhone. And I've actually worked with a couple of clients specifically who are using an iPad. And while the two devices have many of the same core features and the operating systems are extremely similar, there are some differences that you should know about. So today we'll be talking about these differences and how they can affect the user experience when you're using these two different types of devices. First of all, the hardware differences. Clearly, the biggest difference is the size of the device. iPhones are smaller and they're generally designed to be held in one hand and to fit into your pocket. Even so, the larger models can be a bit of a challenge for someone with smaller hands. The trend in recent years has been for the newer iPhone models to have larger screens. As an example of that, the iPhone 16 Pro Max models have a 6.9-inch screen when you measure it diagonally. That's 6.4 inches tall by 3.1 inches wide. By comparison, the iPhone mini, and I'm going to go back to the latest, or the, if you will, the oldest one that's out there that's on the Apple site, is the iPhone 12 mini. It only has a 5.4-inch screen when measured diagonally, but it was 5.2 inches tall and about 2.5 inches wide. Now, once again, they're designed to be used for on-the-go communication, such as phone calls and texts, as well as for quick tasks. iPads, on the other hand, range from having 7.9-inch screens, and that's using the iPad Mini 2, up to a 13-inch screen, which would be the iPad Pro 13. Now, that iPad Mini model measures 7.9 inches tall by 5.3 inches wide. That's only an inch bigger than the largest of the iPhones. The iPad Pro measures a full 11 inches tall by 8.5 inches wide. That's the same size as a standard piece of typing paper, 8.5 by 11. The iPads are tablets that are designed for productivity type of tasks, like note taking and drawing, media consumption, such as reading and watching videos, and other tasks that require more screen space. For example, participating in a Zoom call like this can be a whole lot better on an iPad than it is on an iPhone. So as we continue to review the differences and the similarities, keep these size variations in mind. Of course, the biggest component of those size differences is the bigger screen, which that can allow for more information to be displayed at one time or for whatever is being displayed to be bigger. But there are a few other hardware differences that you need to keep in mind as well. That larger size allows for a larger battery, and the bigger screens require more juice. And the iPads are also designed to work with an Apple Pencil as well as with external keyboards. Now, Apple Pencils can be used for things like drawing and editing and note taking, or for just more precise selection of things when you're on the screen. After all, they've got a pencil point, and those points are a lot more precise than most people's fingertips. Keyboards have been created to work with the iPads, generally in landscape orientation. And that allows the user to not only use a QWERTY style keyboard with two hands, but many of those keyboards also take advantage of a trackpad for navigating the interface in ways that are very similar to navigating on a computer. We're going to talk more about that later. Now, from a purely physical perspective, the iPad splits the difference between an extremely portable handheld cell phone and a full-size computer. It's still a lot more portable than any computer, even for a laptop. Now, as with all of my presentations, I don't know, and I try to plan for the fact that the audience can be comprised of people that are both fully blind, as well as those who still have residual vision and varying degrees of residual vision. So I'm going to try to make sure that in my conversation about differences that I speak both to what will and won't work in different ways that things work with VoiceOver as a screen reading software on these tools, but also for those who still have residual vision and can look at parts of the screen. Now, let's talk about software differences. Prior to 2019, Both iPhones and iPads used the same operating system. It was called iOS. It was a little I and a big O and a big S. However, in 2019, Apple initiated the iPad OS as a distinct operating system specifically for iPads. And while at their core, the core systems are virtually the same, the iPad OS allows for additional capabilities that will take advantage of that larger screen and that tablet form. We've already mentioned a couple of those things that it takes advantage of. And part of that includes the use of the Apple Pencil, multitasking, and the use of a trackpad and integrating a trackpad via a Bluetooth-enabled keyboard. Now, the multitasking experience with an iPad is much more along the lines of a computer desktop, using features such as slide over and split view and things like that. But we're going to talk about those in just a little while. First, let's talk about some of the functional differences. There are some key fundamental functional differences between these two different platforms of iPhones and iPads. On the home page, for an iPhone with its smaller size, it only allows 4 apps in each row of the home page, and only 4 apps can be placed in the dock that's at the bottom of the page. Now, you can have more than one home page, but each home page can have a grid that is 6 rows deep and 4 columns across as the maximum that can be displayed. That's 24 spaces on the grid for apps other than the 4 that are on the bottom in the dock. Now, also, the home pages can only be displayed in portrait orientation, where the skinny measurement, the narrow measurement, is on the top and the bottom. The iPad's larger screen allows for more changes, shall we say. First, you can rotate between portrait and landscape mode, and each of the home screen apps icons will spin in order to be in the correct position in either mode. Second, the grid for the apps on the home screen of an iPad is a 5x6 grid. So in portrait mode, you can get 5 columns wide, and in landscape mode, you can get 6 columns wide. The dock is also quite different on an iPad. It's more flexible, and it's broken into 2 parts. The part on the left can hold up to 10 apps, and it's set by you to always display those apps. Just like the dock on an iPhone, you set which 4 you want to always be on the home screen. With an iPad, it's 10. In addition to that, the portion that's on the right will change automatically and will display your most recently used 3 apps. So the 3 most recently used apps. You can also go into settings and elect to have an icon to show up in that section that will display an icon for your app library. So instead of having to swipe to get over to the app library, you could simply navigate to that button. Now, here's some other really big fundamental differences. Cellular phone calls. iPhones can make cell phone calls. iPads cannot. The exceptions to that are that iPads can make FaceTime and Zoom calls, which are typically done through Wi-Fi networks, okay? They cannot initiate cellular phone calls on an iPad. SMS text messages, and SMS stands for short message service. iPhones can send and receive SMS text messages. iPads cannot. Now, wait a minute, you're going to say, I know I can get my text messages over there. Well, Apple gets around the limitation to some degree by allowing users who have both devices to share their SMS messages across devices that are linked to the same Apple ID. So if you have both devices and you're linked to one Apple ID, then any text message that you would get on your cell phone, on your iPhone, can be displayed also on your iPad. So they get around it, but in all reality, they're not the receiving party. They're just along for the ride based upon that kind of setting that you can create. Now, earlier I mentioned the words multitasking, or one word, I guess. iPhones allow for you to use only one app at a time. And even with the largest iPhone screen, only one app can appear on the screen at one time. And even within that one app, you can only have one page of any one app appear on the screen at one time. Now, with the larger screens of an iPad, iPadOS allows the user to use some multitasking features, and there's three of them in particular that iPhone touts. One of them is called Stage Manager, another is called Slide Over, and another one is called Split Screen. Now, Stage Manager basically allows for little miniature views of your most recently opened apps to appear along the side of the screen. They appear over on the left, as if they're ready and waiting to go back on stage. Okay, so Stage Manager is kind of like it's a euphemistic reference to the theater and people being just off stage and ready to go out when it's their time. Slide Over on an iPad allows you to quickly access a second app in a smaller floating window that slides in from the side of the screen and is superimposed over the top of the first app. And you can move the slide over window to either side of the screen and even switch between multiple slide over apps. Now, both of those two functions are going to be much more involved for or much more of interest to someone with residual vision who might need to be able to see two apps at the same time. There's even a third one called Split View. And Split View on an iPad allows you to run two apps side by side, not one being superimposed over the other, but two side by side. So it kind of splits the screen in half so that you can be able to open first the one app, and then you can press the multitasking button that appears up at the top of the screen and select Split View from a little drop-down menu, and then open up the second app. And that second app is placed on the opposite side of the screen automatically by the iPadOS software. Now, the divider between those two apps starts off right in the middle so that it's equally split between the two. But it can be moved to side in order to resize things. That can be important if you ever need to be able to copy information, for example, from one app to the other. You can have the two side by side and be able to move things around. That's just one example. And all of those multitasking things are things that are probably going to be more suited to people who happen to have residual vision left to be able to see at least portions of the screen. Now, I also mentioned that iPads provide support for the Apple Pencil. Okay, the integration and use of the Apple Pencil can be important for some tasks. They're great for drawing on the screen or for note taking. The screens are designed as touch screens on an iPad, and the touching being done with a very pointed Apple Pencil can work very well for those sorts of activities. Now, they don't allow the Apple Pencil to work with any iPhones. However, I understand from a little bit of research that I did that there are some third-party styluses that you can purchase that are not Apple products, but those will work with some iPhone models. So if you really want to be able to hand sketch or hand write a note or something of that nature, those tools do exist. And that while some iPhone models may support the use of a stylus, it's nothing like the robustness of the use of the Apple Pencil on the iPad for sketching and drawing and note taking. Now, the App Store was split when they ended up having new software for the iPad OS. Many, but not all, of the apps that are available on the iPhone are also available on the iPad. However, the two hardware platforms do have their own separate stores. The iPad store tends to have more apps that involve things in the productivity realm and creativity realm, whether that's for professional or personal use. And those will take care of the increased screen size. And depending upon the way you have your Apple account set up, if you download an app on one of your two devices and the corresponding app is also available for the other device, then you may have an automatic download of that app on the other device. If nothing else, it will say that it's available. So especially if you are one of those individuals who purchases an app and you purchase it on one particular device, then you don't have to purchase it again for the other device. It's available to you because your account, your Apple account, is what purchased it. Now, one other quick thing that is a definite functionality difference is that if you happen to be a Mac computer user, an iPad, not an iPhone, an iPad can be used as a second display screen for the Mac computer wirelessly. You don't even have to have wires to connect them. So if you have a Mac computer, that is an option. Again, that increases productivity. Now, a lot of what I've been talking about so far, you might be wondering, but how does that help me? If I'm visually impaired, I'm not so sure that I'm going to benefit from that. Well, let's talk about some of the accessibility features other than VoiceOver. We'll get to VoiceOver in a minute, but let's talk about a couple of the others first. The Zoom function, which is an accessibility function or feature of the operating system, works well on both the iPad and the iPhone, and it works in exactly the same manner. There's still the conflict for the Zoom activation command, which is a three-finger double tap. I say a conflict because you can't really, well, you can run both Zoom and VoiceOver at the same time, but there's a conflict there. And the Zoom command takes over that three-finger double tap, which of course will create a problem for you in VoiceOver. It'll shift things back a bit. But Zoom, as an accessibility feature, works on both devices. Another thing, you can go into both devices and you can adjust the display and the text size. So all of those same modifications are available. That allows you to adjust the font sizes. You can use bold text. You can increase the contrast, along with all of the other visual adjustments that you may have made on your iPhone. You can also make them on your iPad. Now, one problem that many people have is that if they're using larger font sizes on the iPhone, the screens are so small that you can't really see a lot. So if you're looking at, let's say, um, your list of emails, if you have expanded the font sizes on your phone, then you would only be able to see potentially 2 or 3 emails. And that makes it difficult when you're trying to go through an entire list. You can only scan down for a couple of them, and then you have to go to another page. Um, Obviously, if you're using the larger screen that's on an iPad, you can generally see more content on the screen, even though you may have made your fonts larger. Okay. Another accessibility feature that's not a part of VoiceOver is called spoken content. And the option to invoke spoken content, which include both speak selection and the speak screen commands, complete with the speech controller, those are also there on the iPad, just like they are on the iPhone. So for those people who like to use those tools for on-demand speaking of what's on the screen, those tools are also available. One other thing for people to keep in mind within those accessibility features other than VoiceOver is the use of hearing aids. Okay. If you wear hearing aids, you'll be happy to know that you can also connect your Bluetooth enabled hearing aids to your iPad, just like your iPhone. However, you have to be aware of the fact that hearing aids will only generally allow you to connect to one Bluetooth device at a time. So if you're normally connected to your phone, because the phone is always with you and you're using it for navigation or for anything else, you're going to have to disconnect from your hearing aids from your phone in order to connect them to your iPad. And then when you're done and you need to go back to using your iPhone with your hearing aids, you have to reconnect to the phone. So be aware that even though you could do both, you can only do one at a time. One last thing is that a number of people use accessibility shortcuts in order to get to the various tools like VoiceOver or Zoom, and both devices allow the use of those accessibility shortcuts, and those shortcuts work in the same way. Now I want to pause, and then we'll get started with the VoiceOver differences. Many of you may have been waiting for that. So the VoiceOver functions nearly identically on both the iPhone and the iPad. The core functionality of using gestures to control the movement of the focus throughout the page, to navigate around and between pages, and inside of apps, it's the same. And having VoiceOver provide you with that audible description of what it is that's going on while you move around and what you've been touching and what you've been accessing, all of that is virtually the same. The gesture base, the gestures that you use are exactly the same. Some models have the home button, just like on the phone. Older models tend to have the home button, newer models do not. And the iPad is the same way. Now, that includes all the taps and the swipes and rotor gestures too. They allow you to explore the screen using what I like to refer to as that drag and hunt method, where you're dragging one finger around and hunting for what it is that you're looking for. Now, to keep in mind, on that bigger screen, you got more territory to explore on the iPad because of that larger screen. VoiceOver customizations. A user can make the same customization changes to the way that they've been interacting with VoiceOver on both the iPhone and the iPad. It's virtually the same for languages, voices, pitch, volume, speaking rate, verbosity, rotor item selections, etc. One suggestion or hint, if you do happen to use both devices, I do recommend that you don't use the same voice on both devices. It would be better for you to have a different voice on each device so that you would know which one is talking to you. Otherwise, you're going to get really confused. Okay. Text editing variations. One of the things that I did discover in doing some research on this, and it was reported in Apple Viz, some users have reported differences in the way that text editing performs between the two devices, particularly in the Pages app or in the Notes app. However, those issues are less pronounced on the iPad. And once again, it was primarily mentioned in some of the Apple Viz comments that I had tried to research as a part of this. But be aware that you may see some differences on text editing. Now, multitasking, when I mentioned earlier that you have those different multitasking options available, it can be nice to have more than one app open at one time. But that can cause nuances in the way that VoiceOver reacts when you're moving around and changing the focus from one app to another. For that reason, be cautious, and it might be best for you to still focus on typically having only one app at a time up on the screen when you're using VoiceOver. But let's discuss why. One of the things that I'm going to call them views. One of the key functional differences that I've noticed and that many of my clients have discovered is that with that larger screen, iPad OS will display the applicable list of items on the left, as well as the preview of the selected item being focused on, almost like a preview pane in Windows, over on the right. And a perfect example to explain this is in the Mail app. So in the Mail app on the iPhone, you're initially given the display of a list of the emails that are in your inbox. You have the ability, through the use of the back button in the top left, to move between email folders or even to a different email address if you happen to be someone who manages more than one email account. But the main screen default view is a list of the different emails. That allows you to navigate through the list, figure out which ones by just the title of the email and who it's from. You can decide whether you want to read it or if it's a piece of junk mail, that sort of thing. And once you navigate to the one that you want and then you select the email that you want to read, you double tap on it. When you do that, the list of emails will disappear and it gets replaced by a view of just that one actual email that you've opened. So you either get the display of the email list or you get the display of the actual email, not both. However, because of the extra space available on the iPad, more information is available on the screen. The list of emails will appear on the left side of the screen, taking up roughly a third of the screen size. If you're looking, or if you're thinking from the left towards the center, it's going to take the first third from the left. The rest of the screen is a view of the email that was selected and activated, almost like a preview. In essence, it gives the user a split screen, all within one app, but it gives you a split screen of two different views of that one app, one being the list and the other one of the email that's being read. Now, this view difference, where the listing appears over on the left, doesn't just occur in the Mail app. I'm just using the Mail app as an example. Some of the other more prominent apps that you will find it in are the Mail, obviously, Messages, Notes, Contacts, Reminders, Calendar, Weather, Maps, Music, and Settings. Now, that's probably not even a complete list. There may be others, but those are commonly used apps that have that display view difference, where there's a listing on the left side and the right 2/3 of the screen is a larger screen of whatever you have put the focus on. But since the iPhone doesn't have that space available, once again, you can only interact with either the list or the actual item. To move back to the list, once you're on a given email, you may already remember and know that there is a back button in the upper left corner. And from there, you can double tap that back button and it'll take you back to the list. And then the back button on the list will allow you to go back to a list of different folders or even emails that you want to choose from. Now, in addition to the split of the screen, the split view on the screen, there is something called a sidebar. And it's a key difference that appears only on the iPad. And it is a button that's also in the upper left corner of some of these apps. It's a toggle button, and when VoiceOver lands on it, it will announce Show Sidebar, or it will announce Hide Sidebar. If the sidebar is already on display, you'll get Hide Sidebar, and if it's not on display, you'll get Show Sidebar. If you activate the Show Sidebar button in the Mail app, just continuing with that example, then instead of having two columns, with the left-hand column being the list of emails and the right-hand column being the actual mail that's in focus, the screen is actually broken into three columns, because the sidebar information that is added to the left is the list of the mailboxes and their folders. So you've got three columns. First column is the listing of the mailboxes and folders. The next column would be the list of emails within the folder that you are already accessing. And then the big column over to the right is going to be actually the preview display of the email that you've chosen. Now, when you touch the screen, you can place the focus in any one of those three columns. If you touch the screen in the first column, you're putting the focus in that column. If you touch the screen in the middle column, you're placing the focus in the middle column. And if you touch it over in the body of the email, you're placing the focus in that email. Why is that important? Well, if you're using swiping gestures to navigate, you're only able to swipe within your current column until you get to the absolute very bottom of that column. That's going to be a long time. If you're just swiping right to move to the next item, you can't move from column 1 to column 2 with a swipe gesture. What you have to do is to use the drag and hunt method to change the focus, move your finger across the screen until you get into the column where you want your focus to be placed. Now, regardless of where the current focus is, the tapping gestures are applicable to activate. So for example, a double tap to activate an item, your focus could be over in the left-hand column. And if you double tapped on the right-hand side, a double tap, not a single tap, a double tap will activate wherever your focus is. If, however, you just do an accidental single tap, you're going to change the focus. So that's a warning that comes with the ability to have all of this extra real estate and these multiple columns and these views. With all those extra columns, it's fairly easy When an iPad is large enough that most people are going to hold it with not one hand, but two hands. Okay. Or they're going to hold it in their lap or having sat down on a tabletop or something of that nature. And when that happens and you've got both hands around the edge or the, if you will, grasping the iPad, it would be a fairly easy thing for you to accidentally touch the screen, let's say with your left thumb, when all you're trying to do is to navigate around over on the other side through the email that you've been reading. But just as soon as you touch the screen, you're changing the focus because the phone doesn't know what your intent is. It only knows what it feels. So you can invariably see where there might be an accidental touch that would occur, not where you want it to. It's easy to recover from. You just have to keep in mind, wait a minute, this screen has multiple columns in it, so I need to go ahead and make sure that I get moved back to where I want it to be. Okay? You can easily recover. You just have to know where you want it, where you really want your focus to be, and then tap where you need it to be. Now, using a keyboard with an iPad, I mentioned this before. There's another key difference, and you know, many of you use computers and are therefore comfortable using a QWERTY style keyboard. You can do that obviously on both an iPad and an iPhone because any data entry field, there's a little pop-up that takes up the bottom portion of the screen that is taking, if you will, a QWERTY style keyboard of alpha characters and placing it at the bottom of the screen for you to use it for data entry. Now, that's the electronic keyboard that is built into the device, and it just takes over a portion of the screen. If you're using an iPad, then that keyboard could be smaller and narrower if you're in portrait mode, or it can be full and wide if you're using landscape mode. I have known people to try to type with just their thumbs by holding the two sides. But those people are usually ones who do have sight or who at least have some residual vision and can use their thumbs to figure out which of those keys are on which side. More often than not, if you have limited vision, then you're going to want to be able to use both hands, be more consistent with what you've used on a typewriter. If it's in landscape mode, then that displayed screen of the keyboard is the full width of the landscape of your iPad. Now, if you've ever used a computer typewriter or a computer keyboard or a typewriter keyboard, and you know how to type, then you know that the ability to use the keyboard for data entry and typing can be a pretty welcome benefit. But also be aware that there are a lot of third-party keyboards that are available for iPads. And in many cases, those keyboards actually function as a case as well, so that the actual keys are able to fold up like a clamshell and cover up the screen of the iPad, making it both a keyboard when you need it as well as a protective case when you need it. Some of those keyboards actually have built-in trackpads in them. So again, if you happen to be someone with residual vision and enough residual vision to be able to use a trackpad, that can be a benefit. It can also be a pain because if the trackpad is on and you accidentally touch it and you're not using it, then it can be an issue. Just like having the trackpad on a laptop can be an issue for someone who doesn't use it because it can change your focus without you intending to. So one of the things that you'll want to do if you don't use a trackpad, but you want to have the potential to use the full-size keyboard, is to make sure that you follow the manufacturer's instructions for turning off the trackpad so that it doesn't accidentally move you around on the screen. So in summary, is it worth it? For those who have a little residual vision or no vision at all, my candid answer to the question is that the larger, more expensive iPad may not provide you with much of a user experience improvement. Okay, that's particularly true since you're dependent upon VoiceOver for navigation. However, for those of you who have usable residual vision, the larger screen size can be a very favorable thing. Everything is or can be made larger. The app buttons on the home screen can be larger. The display on the screen can be larger, including both the fonts and photos and all those sorts of things. I recently worked with a client who used the magnifier app on their phone to try to read the label of a package. And then when they experienced the much larger view using the magnifying app on their iPad, it was an eye-opening moment of, oh, that's so much easier because the screen is so much larger and it was able to provide them with a much larger view of what they were trying to magnify. The two devices are designed for two different use cases. Each individual needs to decide how and when they intend to use them and whether or not it's worth the expense of having an iPad. Some people are more comfortable learning one voiceover screen reading software that they can use on two different devices, knowing that the iPad can be the surrogate for a full-size computer for a lot of tasks. But just as each person's vision loss is unique and different, the decision about whether an iPad is a good alternative for them is also an individual choice. So that concludes my prepared comments. We are at a quarter till the top of the hour. I want to invite everyone, if you would like to raise your hand if you have comments and to unmute yourself. You can raise your hand again by using *9 on a phone, Alt-Y on a PC, Option-Y on a Mac, or look for the reactions button in the bottom of the display. And if you want to unmute yourself, use *6 on the phone, Alt-A on the PC, Command-Shift-A on the Mac, or you can use the mic button that's in the lower left corner of your display.
This meeting is being recorded by the lead button. Meeting information button. Zoom button. You are using enhanced encryption. Headphones button. Minimize meeting button. Active speaker avatar. Displaying Eric Bob.
All right. Okay, so Marv, we're hearing all of your voiceover
Oh, you are?
commentaries there.
Oh,
yes, sir, we are.
Oh, crap. Because
this session is being recorded.
I'm using headphones too. I didn't think it would do that.
Okay.
But what you have confirmed, something that I believe that, in even trying to use them, that for a total, an iPad is a pain in the butt.
Personally, I see limited benefit, but it really is a function of if you're using VoiceOver all the time, then you don't really get a lot of benefit out of it.
Well, and also think of usage for your hand. With your phone, you can actually like rest a finger on a corner or something and keep, where an iPad, you're freehanding an awful lot too.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
true.
So you're actually using more muscle to try to, to try to use it. My wife is an iPad user. That's her. I think she likes it almost as much as me. Mm-hmm. But she's sighted.
Okay. Well, and like I said earlier in my conversation points, our participants can run the gamut of people who are totally blind as well as those who do have residual vision. So I try to make sure that the material that I discuss applies to both and that I talk about both the pros and the cons of either way. So hopefully I did that today in a manner that for those who do still have residual vision, that they would have a better knowledge about what the options are. Some of the key uses that people that I know who have vision loss use the iPad for is for, if you will, listening to books and things of that nature, because they can use Bard with the iPad. They can go ahead and do that sort of thing very well with an iPad. And if they happen to have the separate Bluetooth keyboard, then and they have the ability to use that keyboard just like they would on a keyboard of a computer. So yes, it's VoiceOver, but it's not VoiceOver from a Mac's VoiceOver perspective. It is iPad OS VoiceOver. So it's the same VoiceOver commands that they are used to using on their phone. I see another person here has raised their hand. Karen, would you go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, I know that a friend of mine calls me on her iPad. Is she calling on the phone and then picking up the iPad?
Well, one of two things. She could be using FaceTime to make the call because you
Mm,
can make a
maybe,
FaceTime
but
call
I'm not. She
even
may
though
be
you're
doing
not
FaceTime audio. Yeah, maybe.
right. So you can do FaceTime audio only, in which case you're not really using the pictorial aspects of it. Just like with Zoom today, we have the ability to do video, but none of us have our cameras on. And we're doing it basically for audio purposes. So you can do it that way. But as I mentioned earlier, the iPad itself cannot make phone calls, but it can do FaceTime and Zoom, and that's generally through a Wi-Fi connection.
Okay, now when she calls me, wouldn't I hear FaceTime audio call from so and so? I don't hear that. And is it similar to like the watch, where the watch necessarily doesn't make calls, but as long as it's near your phone?
I believe you're right. I believe that there is the scenario where, in essence, she may be using her phone to make and dial the call, but then she's using her iPad as the way that she's participating.
Yeah, I don't know how she's doing it, but I know she calls me because she always says, "Oh, I hate that phone. I don't know where our phone is. I'm on my tablet." She always calls me from her tablet. She hates the phone.
Okay.
She's probably using
And
FaceTime.
yeah,
But wouldn't I hear that though? Wouldn't I hear when she calls me? Wouldn't I hear FaceTime audio from so and so?
You usually would, or it would say, or it brings up the FaceTime. Do you have a different ringer? Because FaceTime like has a different ringer. Is it, you know, um,
yeah.
She's not
You
calling me on
can
voiceover off. Yeah, I don't think she's calling me on FaceTime. I don't know. I don't hear it. I don't hear,
okay.
FaceTime
Now,
audio. Definitely not FaceTime video because I know that clearly says it's FaceTime video from whoever, and I usually don't pick up. But
it's careful, there be dragons here. You're going to be on camera, kind
yeah,
of thing.
I do not pick up FaceTime audio. I mean, video calls. No.
I get it. I get it. Now,
All
like I
right. So
said,
I
I've
have to
had
ask
some
her if
clients to
she's.
ask about whether or not it's worth their while, and my general response is similar to what Marv said, and that is that it really depends upon their capabilities from a vision standpoint. If they are totally blind, then I don't usually recommend it because it's a lot more expense. But if they are someone who has residual vision and can benefit from the residual vision and the ability to have much larger things on a bigger screen, then it can be definitely a benefit to them.
I like grandkids' pictures.
Exactly. Exactly.
Videos, and pictures and things like that. But yet, if you can see pictures, you may or may not be using VoiceOver.
Right. And that's why I also went into the non-voiceover accessibility features because there are people who use, for example, spoken content and they use Zoom so that when they need to, they can make things bigger. And they use spoken content to have something spoken aloud to them on demand. And they are visually impaired individuals. They just still have some level of vision, and they're continuing to use that uh, that vision as long as they can.
And Eric, this is Karen. You can't mention the trackpad. What is the trackpad for?
So the trackpad is basically a flat surface, usually rectangular in shape, that is in the front part of a keyboard. A number of laptops will have a trackpad in front of the keyboard, and then a number of keyboards that you can buy as Bluetooth attachments to your iPad will have a trackpad in the front. That trackpad is sensitive to touch. So similar to how you would use a mouse to move a pointer around, the
Mhm.
trackpad will move the pointer around as well because you're touching it and you're in doing so, you're moving the pointer. But beyond just doing that, trackpads can receive gestures as well. So in other words, if you wanted to use two fingers to scroll up and scroll down is a pretty common trackpad
iPad left.
gesture that you can use. So there are gestures that are available on trackpads as well as just moving the cursor around.
Hmm. Okay. And then you mentioned you can have, I think you said two apps open,
You can
something
have
like
two
that.
separate apps open at the same time. Well, you can have more than one app open on your iPhone. You can only see one at a time.
Right.
And then on the one that's open, you can only see one page at a time. On an iPad, you could have not only like the multi-columns that I was talking about with the Mail app, that's multiple views of different components of the Mail app that you're able to have on the display at the same time, but you can also have two separate apps open. And an example of that might be this, Karen. So let's say that you received an email from someone, and in that email, they gave you their contact information. And you decided that you wanted to add them to your contacts on your iPad. You could have the email app, or the Mail app rather, open on one side and the contacts app open on the other side by side views. And that's using the side by side tool. The other tool that you could use that we also talked a little bit about allows you to just have a superimposed piece over the top of it. Okay. So both of those
Yeah.
in the multitasking options that we mentioned, slide over as well as split view, you can have more than one app open at the same time. So in that example, you could take the contact information that they gave you in the email and you could do a copy and paste and put it into the contacts field if you wanted to.
Okay, that would be convenient. Could you have something like, could you be listening to music on YouTube and then you reading your emails at the same time?
I believe that that is something that you can do because, as you know, with YouTube, if you don't have it open, it shuts down
Mm-hmm.
unless you paid for a membership. So I do believe that you have the ability for YouTube to be open and then for you to be scanning through your emails or another app at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that would be good. I would like
Yep.
that. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And we've lost a couple of our participants already,
Yep.
but
Yeah,
I know we're
Adam's
nearing the
out.
top of the hour. Does anyone else have any questions today?
I have one more quick question, if that's okay. Do you have to have all those split screens?
No.
Can you have just one? Can it look just like a big giant phone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You can make it to where it is only one screen or one app at one time. Now, the bit of the two views or the two columns, like in the Mail app and those other apps that I mentioned,
Settings.
that like settings, those are still going to have the two columns.
Oh,
You
okay.
have the choice of using the optional piece that was in there relevant to the sidebars. Okay, sidebars you get to turn on and off, but the two column view where the one view is your list of items and the other is the one that you've actually put the focus into or onto rather, that is not an option. You can't
No.
close down that.
Okay. And do you have to, will the apps automatically change to that wider grid, or can you change it back to 6x4 if you want to?
Oh, you're talking about up on the home screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it will automatically have the grid of the 5x6 or the 6x5.
Okay. You can't change that?
No,
Well,
Okay.
doesn't it
no.
depend, though, if you turn it sideways, doesn't it switch it?
Right. So if you have it in portrait mode, it's 5 wide and 6 deep. If you have it in landscape mode, it is 6 wide and 5 deep. Okay, so in landscape mode, it's 6 columns and 5 rows, not counting the dock. If it's in portrait mode, it is 5 columns and 6 rows. Either way, it's 30 spots on the grid.
Okay. Are there any apps that are specific, or any well, apps, I guess, or any other than the way the columns and the different sides of the screen and stuff like that? What else is like? Are there any apps, I guess, exclusive to the iPad?
Yes, there are
Like you
definitely
can
some
only use
apps
on the
that,
iPad? Okay.
right. There are some apps that are available in the App Store that are specifically for the iPad. I don't happen to have any of them myself, so I can't name any
Okay.
off the top of my head. Um, I started out using an iPhone, and at one point I got myself an iPad because I do have residual vision, and I felt a number of ways that the iPad was going to be fun and beneficial to use. So I did that. But I don't have any apps that I can think of that are iPad only.
Okay. All right. Can you please send me the recording? This is Karen Rose.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right.
Thanks for
Well,
clearing a lot of this up, Eric, because like a lot of those things I sort of knew from trying to wrestle, with iPads over times, and I wound up feeling very tired after I use it for a while. For me, the phone is just so much easier.
well, I can certainly appreciate that. And the thing that I would say is that, as I mentioned at the end, each person's vision loss is theirs, and each
Yeah.
person's ability to work with the different tools is up to them. And what their use cases are is going to be unique to each person. So it is purely a function of choice. And we want to make sure that we speak to all of those
Oh
different
yeah.
possibilities here.
Eric, did you
So
find that more people use the tablet just holding it or putting it on a stand or putting it on the table?
the iPad,
Yeah.
well,
What do most
many of
people like?
them,
Just holding it
m-
in their hands?
many folks will have
Julia Sololek.
um, a case that also has the keyboard. And when that happens, usually the cases are designed to where they will tilt the actual screen back almost like it looks like it's or pardon me, like a computer,
Oh,
a
okay.
laptop computer that's been opened. But when you don't do that, if they don't have a case that functions in that way, then they will definitely have some sort of a case to protect it because it's just as fragile, if not more fragile than the phone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to keep the screen protected. So it's one of those things of having a case. I have seen some cases that have straps built into the back so that you can hold them in one hand without having to be able to use, your thumb as a fulcrum to hold it. By having the strap on the back, you can kind of put your hand through the strap in the back and know that you've got a secure hold of the screen.
Mm-hmm. But most people,
Um,
you just see it holding with both hands.
Holding them with both hands or having them set down in their lap, yes.
Or their
Well,
lap.
and sighted people, like my wife has always liked the cases that have a swivel where she can use it in portrait or landscape. And so like there's a little swivel on the back, but she mostly uses it in landscape. And there's a little notches that at the bottom edge of the iPad you can tilt it back a couple different angles. So she'll put it on the table, or even when she's lying down, she'll have the case sort of standing up. So the case is, even for looking at it, whether you're fully sighted, you'd still use it kind of that way. Holding it, I don't think she ever holds it in her hands,
Mm-hmm.
even though she can see. So
I think
He
it
just
really comes
pokes
down
at the
to the
screen.
size of the iPad too.
yeah,
The
she's got
smaller
the Pro.
iPads, yeah, if you've got the smaller iPad, it's sometimes easier for somebody to have in their hands. Where the bigger ones, like the iPad Pros that are 13 inches or 12.9,
Yep.
they're heavier and it's a much easier thing to use either the case that has the built-in clamshell kind of design to it that will hold it up, or to have it laying down on the table or your lap.
Thank you, Eric.
You're quite welcome. All right, everyone. So I am going to go ahead and stop the
Reactions.
recording
Button.
now.